Good morning, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Wednesday, September 16th, 2015. Taking a look at what's going on out in the tropics. Pretty much nothing over here in the western Atlantic basin to worry about. We do have these two areas, these red X's, if you will, out in the open Atlantic. This is what they look like via satellite. Pretty well organized, on their way to becoming tropical depressions more than likely. This is Invest Area 93L. Try to draw that in there. And then this is Invest Area 95L. And just real quick, what does that mean exactly? Well, when you have these areas of disturbed weather, the Hurricane Center has a naming convention where they use the numbers 90 through 99, and then they start over again at 90, and the letter L for Atlantic, the Atlantic Basin. Actually, it's, I think, officially an AL for Atlantic Basin, so it would be AL 93 or whatever. But we just call it 93L for short in the hurricane blogosphere world, and it's just a way to keep up with what's what. For example, if this area were to be of interest to the Hurricane Center, if they thought there was even a 10% chance of development, or they wanted to let people know what was going on and they might run some computer models on it, then this would get a number. The next one would be 96L, for example. And it's just a way to keep up with what's what, just like we do when we name a system. So if this gets named, it would be the next tropical depression, TD number 9, I believe, and then eventually it will be called Ida if it goes on to become a tropical storm. And if this becomes a tropical storm, it would take on the J name, which this year is Joaquin. I don't know if the J is that hard. Joaquin, whatever, you get it. So that's why we call these things 93Ls and 95Ls. You say, well, what happened to 94L? Well, it was over here in the Western Gulf, and it's died out, moved inland, and it's gone. So you can have these things out of sequence in terms of where they're located, and one can dissipate and go away, and you can have sort of a gap, if you will. 93 here, 95 there. So that's how that works. So here we go. You see up there it says AL93. We call it 93L. Here it is. This is the forecast plot. Looks like a tree trying to grow out of the ground or grass or something. Pretty big divergence in the models for the most part. More than likely just going to kind of drift over the open Atlantic way out in the middle of nowhere. The intensity plots, maybe a weak tropical storm. With time, 30, 40, 50 miles per hour at the most. We'll see. Sometimes you can get a surprise where something for 24 hours will find ideal conditions, especially over the deep tropics where there's a lack of data. There's no weather balloons being launched. A few ship reports, that's about it. But the upper air data is very sparse because of no people being out there. Then we have Invest Area 95L, and these are the westernmost Cape Verde Islands, just to give you a reference point. And this would move off generally to the northwest, a little bit tighter cluster of model guidance there, and its intensity plots indicating that maybe this tries to become a hurricane over time, but again staying well out into the Atlantic. Why will both of these systems struggle? It's the same story as we've been talking about for most of the hurricane season, and that's very strong upper level winds cutting across the deep tropics, and that's just not conducive. It never will be. When you have very strong wind blowing across these systems, they simply cannot develop. And look at that. Some of those wind speeds, that's a 50 knots of upper level winds blasting just to the north of 93L. So it has a very short window in which to try to develop. It's got a little bit of a protective cocoon around it now, but it's very short-lived, believe me. And then in the western Atlantic basin, the flow is generally out of the west or west-northwest, and that's just not conducive for development. There's no area of upper-level high pressure that acts like an umbrella shielding these systems from strong upper-level winds, and until and unless that changes, we're not going to see any development in the western basin. And that's just the way it is. And it's great for coastal dwellers. You don't want any impacts from hurricanes. This is your season. Now, why are both of these systems out here not going to be just coming on to the west like we've seen with Danny and Erica, for example? Even though they kind of died out in this area, they still made it pretty far to the west. Well, the upper level winds are such, in the steering layer anyway, that we don't have strong high pressure sitting out here to drive these systems off to the west. That's not existent right now. And you can see that in the GFS model. We have some fairly low heights in the atmosphere. So this is kind of like a valley in the atmosphere, and these tropical systems that are sitting out here are kind of like water running towards that valley. They're going to go to the area of the lower heights in the atmosphere is what we call it. And so they literally just kind of drift up here into this low height field where there's a lack of deep layer ridging, and therefore they will stay out over the open Atlantic. And this is the 24-hour period. This is about, where is this? 72 hours out. You don't see much change with that at all. See, really no ridging out here, so there's no mechanism to drive these systems to the west. It's just that kind of season. In the eastern Pacific, anything going on out there? Not really. The only area that the Hurricane Center outlooks, 10% chance of development, but probably not going to do much. We're just in a kind of a downward phase right now. There's no active, what we call Madden-Julian oscillation activity anywhere around the globe. That might change over the next couple of weeks. You get these periods of several named storms around the globe over a 2 to 3 week time, and then it kind of goes away for a little bit. So I think we're going to have 5 to 7 days of very little activity, and then things should probably perk up again. And we're past the peak of the season. There's a secondary peak coming up in early October, and maybe around that time we'll see some more activity. But between now and then, yeah, probably not very much, and certainly not much for the rest of the week except what's going on out in the open Atlantic, which again is of no consequence to any land areas whatsoever. So there you go. The weekend coming up will be fantastic. No worries from hurricanes. All right. Well, that's it for me for today. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Again, I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, and of course for Hurricane Pro and HD. I'll have another video blog for you ready this coming Monday.